Almost 2 months ago, a dramatic event occurred in the United Kingdom. Queen Elizabeth II died. The Queen, who was 96 years old, reigned for more than 70 years, and her death marked the end of an era. It also raised the question that has been asked more and more in the recent years. Is there still a place for a British royal house in this day and age? This question even became more relevant as the new king, Charles III, struggled to get wide support over the years. And as you can see, there are still quite mixed feelings toward them today. Therefore, if the British royal house wants to survive, it must win the people's approval by ensuring the right royal image for the new king. But how to create the right royal image? Well, in King Charles' case, the answer is, of course, using the media. Newspaper articles, the production of television series, and the usage of social media. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and more all gives the British people a glimpse of the public activities of the king and other members of the royal family, and therefore allow them to gain popularity and justify the status as heads of the country. I mean, who wouldn't fall in love with this picture of Prince William with his kids? But this question of how to create the right royal image is not unique to the British royal family. In fact, it was a crucial question for many rulers who needed to gain their people's support throughout history. But how did they do that before the internet and social media? Which means did they use in order to create the right royal image? Let's see what can we learn from a ruler who rebranded himself almost 550 years ago in one of the most important states of that period, the Ottoman Empire. This ruler was an Ottoman Sultan with the catchy name Bayezid II. Bayezid, much like King Charles, had big shoes to fill. His father, Sultan Mehmed II, was the famous conqueror of Constantinople and was considered already during his lifetime as one of the the greatest sultans ever lived. And even making this even more difficult, his father didn't declare any of his sons as heir, and his death left the Ottoman elite in growing unrest. Therefore, although Bayezid managed to capture the throne, the first years of his reign were unstable. He needed to establish his legitimacy and gain the support of the Ottoman elite. In other words, he needed to create the right royal image in order to stay in power. But how does a 15th century ruler create the right royal image? Well, in the 15th century, of course, there was no Instagram or Twitter. Therefore, Bayezid had to assert his new image slightly different than King Charles. He did so by composing new historical accounts covering the events, the history of the Ottoman dynasty and the events of his own reign. And today I'm going to speak about one of these works, a unique text titled The Book of Kings, according to Malakahi. And this is a text that have never been published before, and it's in the heart of my research. And I'm studying its original manuscript, which was written in Persian, and trying to understand how this text helped to create the right imperial image for Sultan Bayezid. So when we examine this text, we can find three aspects that the author manipulated in order to create the right royal image for the Sultan. First, the content, the topics that the work deals with. Second, the model, its source of inspiration. And third, its form, what did it look like and how it was visually presented. So let's start with the content. This work focused on two main topics: Bayezid's struggle with his brothers over the throne, and Bayezid's first military victory outside Ottoman territories in Moldavia in the northwestern Black Sea. Focusing on these two topics helped to demonstrate Bayezid's success as a new sultan. Not only that he did overcome his brothers and became the true, legitimate Ottoman sultan, but he also was a victorious conqueror, not falling short of his father, who was well known for his successful campaigns and conquests. But the content was not the only thing that the author used. Another means was the work's model. Even today, we constantly use models in order to create the right image for us. For example, we use accents, different slangs, unique style of clothing, or just trying to copy the person that we admire. In this case, the history of Bayezid used another model, a literary model. This work was modeled upon one of the most important literary works of that period, the Shahnameh, the Book of Kings. This work was not only a literary work, but it was also well associated with concepts of rulership and legitimacy in the Islamic world. Now, the history of Bayezid not only shared the same style and language as the original Book of Kings, but it also shares the same title, which instantly connects between Bayezid's history and the original Persian epic poem, and therefore help to connect between the two. Bayezid's history also mentions characters from the Persian epic poem and used them in order to describe the Sultan. For example, in the text, Bayezid is called Khosrow, the name of the great Iranian king, who also appears in the original Shahnameh. And the text also mentioned other kings and heroes like Jamshid, Rustam, and Iskandar, Alexander the Great, in order to depict Bayezid's actions and character. Making these textual connections between Bayezid's history and the original Book of Kings helped to present the Sultan as one of the ancient kings of Iran, as a worthy Sultan who continuing the long-standing tradition of imperial rule in the Islamic world. Finally, the last aspect that the author manipulated to create Bayezid's right royal image was the work's form, that is, the magnificent manuscript it was written in. Now, not only that this work had several drafts, which indicates how much thought and attention it was given, but its final copy was a magnificent illustrated manuscript. And here you can see some of its very nice illustrations. This was actually the first illustrated history ever created in the Ottoman court, initiating a tradition of Ottoman illustrated histories that continued in the next following centuries. Now, creating an illustrated manuscript was an expensive and lengthy process that required skilled artists and special tools and means. Therefore, by making this illustrated manuscript, it helped to present Bayezid as a patron of art and literature, and that was not only willing but able to order the production of this kind of luxurious manuscript. In addition, the illustrations themselves help to demonstrate Bayezid's right image, because they visually asserted the image that the text created for the Sultan. In the end of the day, one question remained. Did it work? Did this history actually manage to create the right royal image for Sultan Bayezid? Did it help them to establish his rule? Answering this question is hard and difficult, but if you look at the big question, the big picture, the answer is yes. This work had a significant cultural impact on the Ottoman court. During the next century, at least 10 other histories were created in the same model of the Book of Kings, and they used similar topics and were all presented in illustrated manuscript as well. Therefore, we can say, in other words, that this work, the Book of Kings according to Malakahi, actually created a new Ottoman royal image, one that changed forever the way that the Ottoman elite perceived their leaders, the Ottoman sultans. Exploring the mechanisms of creating the right royal image for Sultan Bayezid help us to better understand how the cultural impact of crafting new images had on the early Middle East. It also helps us to better understand how cultural impact one another in the larger, in the broader sense, and therefore also help us to better understand how images shape culture even today in the 21st century. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm Ofer from Biotechnology. In comparison today, were these manuscripts exposed to the public or only to the
This is a very good question. This is always the question that we need to ask ourselves: who was the audience? Who was the target? In this case, it's even more interesting because this kind of work was so expensive, and we don't really know where they were kept. We know they stayed in the Ottoman palace in Istanbul. This manuscript actually still there, and but we don't know who really read this kind of works. We do know that at least from the 16th century, these kind of works, because it was in verse and it was illustrated, usually it was read aloud during kind of meetings between the Sultan and his entourage, and they were sitting together and they like opened the book and read it together and look at the pictures. So we don't know for sure who read it, but the fact that it stayed in the palace and it's such a good condition actually probably means that it was well kept and people read it all the time. And also, since this work actually started a tradition of writing histories at the same style, and that was also illustrated, like I said. So if no one read those histories, then why do another one? So that's probably indicates that it had at least some impact to some extent.
Hi. Did you consider Atzorek from Tel Aviv University? Great talk. Thank you very much. Did you consider other models, such as the Christian models or the other Renaissance models?
Yes, well, what I love about Ottoman history is that the Ottomans actually used many references and many cultures that were prevalent in the Ottoman territories. So I'm personally interested in the effects of the Persian culture, but definitely there were other cultures that affected the image of the sultans and the identity of the Ottoman elite. In this case, in particular, the Persian influence is the main focus. But yes, obviously the Ottomans had many things that influence on him, and Byzantine and Christian traditions had a huge impact of this image, especially during this point, because at this period the Ottomans weren't the Ottoman Empire. They were like a small empire, a local area, but in the local area. But after the conquest of Constantinople, the influence of the Byzantine became even larger, and they actually managed to had this different influence during this period.
Hi, really interesting talk, Daphne and Bar, Hebrew University. My question is, the royal image, you talk a lot about sort of the, as I see it, correct me if I'm wrong, the internal effects. And I'm interested if maybe this text also signals outwardly to other, conquerors, or how this image, this royal image projects out externally, if that makes sense.
Again, it's very hard for us to understand, like to really know what happened. But I think it did had some effect because this image of the ruler from the Persian culture is something that is not unique for the Ottomans. It's something that all other ruling elite shared during this period. So by presenting Sultan Bayezid as part of this tradition, it's actually putting him in the same level of other rulers. So maybe other rulers didn't know he had this history. They probably didn't. But the fact that the Ottoman elite knew it, for them, it's like associated their sultan and also themselves as part of this larger tradition that is comparable to other ruling elites of the period. So the answer is yes and no.
Wow. Thank you, Ronnie. This was a fascinating talk, and I have so many questions, but I'm going to try to just ask one. And it's this kind of paradox. Louder. Yeah, right. I'm Sarah from the Hebrew University. And my question is about this paradox you're presenting, like the connection of tradition and then to create a new image out of a very long tradition, and to describe this tension between tradition and innovation. And I think it's a question that bothers a lot of us in our research. So.
Yeah, and thank you for that. It's something I didn't thought about it in that level. It's interesting. Yes, I mean, I think that we, as I said, we constantly use something, models, in order to present something new. So yes, I think this is what really happened here, and yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Danielle from the Hebrew University. That was fascinating. Thank you. I wanted to ask you a little bit about not about the how, but about the what, because you said that what you're looking at is how does a sultan in the time of Bayezid created the right royal image. But I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what is the right royal image at the time of Bayezid, and is it unique to that time?
Yes, thank you. This is actually part of the question. What is the right royal image? And if I'm connecting to the other questions, some would say it's the Byzantine emperor, because he was the one that controlled Constantinople before the Ottomans came. And some would say it's a Muslim Orthodox ruler. But I think that this work, this historical account, actually shows us that there is another way to look at what is the right royal image. But as I said, we can't look at it as the only thing. It's all these traditions together that create the right royal image. This is only one aspect of what it is to be a royal figure in this period. And I think usually because we tend to think about, let's say, the British royal house and not what happened 500 years ago, so we have this image of how a royal should be and what a royal image should be. So I think, if anything, this kind of works help us to understand this is more complex. There's no just one way. And making someone royal is not an easy thing, not an easy task as we can think.
Last question, Omer.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting. I'm Omer from the Hebrew University too. I wanted to ask you about the relationship between the illustrations and the text, because usually we either see like portraits of monarchs, or we have text. But here there is like another language, another realm that we can work on the image. And maybe that image, at least for me when reading a book, it's really powerful. And I think like other people who don't really care about all the text for the king, like what the illustrations does and the relationship between them and what it adds, because you said it's a new thing to do, right? So how they use it to shape the image of the Sultan in a different way than it was in the past.
Well, thank you for this question. This is actually one of the reasons I chose this manuscript, because of the illustrations. I didn't learn art history, but I love art. And I think what you said is definitely correct. I mean, the illustrations are something new that adds to how this work actually tried to create the right royal image for the Sultan. And what's interesting is that these illustrations actually, at least at some point, some extent, were influenced by the original Book of Kings as well. The artists who created these illustrations were Persian. So what did the Ottoman elite thought about these illustrations? We can't really know today, but it's definitely was something new and unique that affected the audience. And also, as I said, it was very expensive. So if you choose to put illustrations, it meant something. And it was I think it was a big part of why this history is actually important and why it had probably influence over the royal image of Bayezid. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.